All right, so I want to talk a little bit about something that I was talking with my buddy about earlier today, and that's to summarize the conversation, it's if the publishing industry is biased against men. I think that kind of objectively it is, but I don't think that it's malicious, and I want to talk a little bit about that. For those of you who don't know, I'm Noah. I'm an artist and I'm an author. My book of Stone and Seal is out now. I actually don't have a copy in reach, so this is a drawing I did for the cover. I do all of the art in the novels myself. They're all really sick, and you should go get it. The ebook is free. But I was talking with my buddy about, just kind of the publishing industry and how he feels like he's unable to find stories that appeal to him. And for the full credit of this argument, he doesn't look very hard. He's not very good at looking. He expects literature to be spoon-fed to him, which I feel like we're all a little bit guilty of. I know that I'm guilty of it, so it's not a huge problem. But I did start thinking a lot about like whether the publishing industry is actually skewed against men, and that's like a really that's such a simplistic argument to make over a very complex situation. I'm not even really going to call it an issue, but I wanted to dive a little into it. This is one of the first videos I've actually done like a whole slew of research for, because I was actually genuinely curious about it after I talked to him about it. And I just kind of used the past 10 years and a lot of 2024 to formulate my opinion as far as like sales data goes. And the best-selling book, from what I can find, last year was Rebecca Yarros. It was Fourth Wing. Love it, hate it. It was one of, if not the best-selling book for all of last year. I've never read Fourth Wing. I don't think that I'm going to read Fourth Wing. It doesn't seem like my style of novel, but you know what? Who knows? Maybe I will. And most of the novels, at least within the fiction sphere, are women writing it, and it does seem like it's oriented primarily towards women. Now, John Grisham's in there, Stephen King is in there. Like, there are definitely books in there written for men, and it wouldn't be hard to find. I love Stephen King, and I didn't even realize that he released a book last year. I'm probably going to go buy it and read it. But when I was thinking about this, about whether or not, and like looking at all of the data and what I know about the publishing industry, because I know a lot more now, especially since publishing my first novel, I do understand why someone could be mistaken for having that opinion, that like the publishing industry is skewed away from men. And I kind of agree with it. But I don't think that it's malicious. I don't think that there's a board meeting happening between like the executives of HarperCollins and Penguin Random House that, how can we keep the male voice down? I think that that's kind of a ridiculous assertion, and I don't think that there's any real data to prove it. I think that at the end of the day, women read more than men. It's just kind of a fact, and at the moment, the current stage of literature, publishing houses have found what sells. And, more like female-driven narratives within a fantasy setting about, really just anything have a tendency to sell better. It's just kind of objective fact. And I mean, what sells is what's going to permeate culture. That's a tried and true thing throughout the entirety of history, and especially in like the capitalist society that we live in. So I think that this idea that like men are being put down by the executives of literature, I can't find any real data to substantiate that claim. And I still don't think that it's that big of a problem. I think that like stories are just kind of a pendulum. We went through decades, if not half a century, of authors trying to recreate Tolkien, and publishers really incentivizing that pursuit. There's no shortage. I'm not going to name them all, especially because like I think that there are authors that chased that pursuit and execute it very well. They were very clearly influenced by Tolkien. they made their own work and they did it super well, and now they're staples of the genre. And there's also just some very blatant copies that are very uninspired that I really do have qualms with. Again, I'm not going to mention any like specific titles because I don't want that to be what this channel is about. But the point is that we went through a very long time of publishers pushing this thing because they knew it was what sold. And then we went through like, you know, in the 90s, you know, early 2000s, there was this very big push for kind of the espionage and the thrillers and the mysteries and stuff like that, and kind of more speculative fiction. And, you know, we chased that for a while. Like, the trend that we are in right now of kind of like this romantasy, like more female-driven narratives is that's, you know, a broad brush painting across like specifically the genre of fiction, which is what I'm talking about. I'm not really into nonfiction books all that much. B, it's a trend, and the reason that it's a trend is not out of really anything other than it sells. And C, not a bad thing. I really like, I don't read any of it. I really don't. Like, none of the Sarah J. Maas, none of the Rebecca Yarros, but the existence of this stuff, like, doing well in the market does not take away from me as a reader, and it doesn't take away from me as an author. And I think that that's a conversation that, like, we should have more. It's hard. It's really freaking hard in 2025 to gatekeep literature. It just is. Like, I was offered a couple indie book deals and ultimately decided to self-publish. I'm super happy that I did. You can self-publish a novel with not that much money. You just have to have the grit and the grind to do it. And, you know, it's not easy. It's significantly harder. But, you know, it's you can absolutely do it as an author. You can put your work out there. And as a reader, if you want to find work, just 30 minutes of effort is all it really takes. Like, even just watching the channel, I'll give you a few right now that I think are stories that, like, men will really enjoy. Between Two Fires, Christopher Buehlman. Anything written by Christopher Buehlman. He's a phenomenal author, and Between Two Fires is literally one of my favorite novels I've ever read. It's incredible, and it came out a couple years at this point. But he's still an active author, and he is a traditionally published author. And, you know, it orients towards men. And if you don't like the stuff that's being put out right now, if you read everything published before 1999, you would not be able to keep up with all of the stories out there. And like that this isn't meant to like make light of something if you're really passionate about this issue. It's just really my opinion on it. I don't think that it's that bad. And I don't think that the existence of like chicks writing whatever they want to write, I don't think that really takes away from any of us as authors or readers. Yeah, and like that's, I don't know. I don't think that this is a conversation that's ever really going to go away. If we're being completely honest, like, I'd say that like writing has always been like a very quick pendulum about whether it's been female dominated or male dominated, and it's been an argument much longer than anyone watching this video has been alive and will persist long after we're dead. You know, if you look at poetry right now, poetry was seen for a very long time as an exclusively masculine endeavor, and people don't really understand that, but it absolutely was. And it was almost like done in spite of like literature at the time, at least in like the formalist movement of like the 1800s. And you know, it took really strong and brave women to kind of break into that scene and write about the things that they wrote about. And you know, women poetry, like, you know, Dickinson and Shefna, like, tend to be more or less introspective as male poetry does. But I'm not going to get into that right now. But the point is, like, it was a very male-dominated scene for a very long time. And now it is almost exclusively women. That's something that's actually really hard for me, as I started loving reading because of poetry. I love reading so much because of poetry, and I love poetry so much. And all of the poets I love, the vast majority of them were published well before like the 1960s, 1950s. And if you look at poetry now, that is an area where I have looked very diligently, and I found some pretty cool modern poets, contemporary poets. But it is a space absolutely skewed towards women, by women, for women. Like, poetry is dominated by women, period. There's not a human being out there that can refute that claim. And if it's not dominated by women, it's dominated by really, really pathetic, lonely men. I'm going to stand by that statement because I really do freaking believe it. But, you know, it's still not that bad of a thing because it's a phase, you know. We're going to get a poet, you know, in the next decade or half century that's really going to, like, break the glass ceiling for men. And, like, men are going to start writing rhythmic narratives about brotherhood, about, you know, X, Y, and Z, and it's going to come back, and I'm going to be really, really excited if I'm still alive to see it. But I think that at least with literature, and this is going to go into like a philosophical and technical rant that I'm not married to. So what are we at? 11 and a half minutes. So everything past this, maybe take with a grain of salt because I'm not married to these thoughts. But I think with literature, typically what you still see is you have 1, 2, and maybe 3 voices that really influence a work. Usually it's just one. Usually you have the author. The author has this cohesive idea that they formulate, they write, and they attempt to publish. And you are bringing this finished idea, this finished work to publishers, fishing and seeing who wants to bite. That is still, to this day, for the most part, in a very blatant, like, elevator pitch, that is how publishing works. Whereas with other media, in order to develop a story, if it's not, you know, built off of a book, if it's just an original idea, you have so many voices coming in to create this project. And I think that that's why a lot of the times you have more topical trends permeating the idea, because, like, you don't have, like, a screenwriter doesn't have the final say in what goes into a show. A director, as important as they are not like the arbiter of what is and is not in their movie. There's executive producers, there's writers, there's people with influence in the production scene that are not even around the set. Like, that's why I think you have, it could be a more nuanced conversation in the scope of other media like television. But with writing and with art in the traditional sense, for the most part, we do still have, at absolute maximum, still in the single digits of people working on a novel to realize its potential. And then as far as it getting pushed into society, it's, you know, it's just still like a matter of, you know, is it the right time and our publisher's going to bite? I'm not certain whether or not it was the right time for my novels. They're doing way better than I thought they would. You should go get it. They're super sick. But, like, I queried to very big publishing houses, and I got turned down specifically for that reason. Like, hey, this was a really good idea, but it just doesn't fit the current landscape of publishing. And I really did appreciate the couple agents that told me that. I don't think that it's really that much of a problem. I think that publishing companies, like, we can get into, like, the greed of publishing companies into another video, maybe, at least what I've seen. But at the end of the day, I really do think that they're just going to sell what sells. Sure. To sell what sells. And I think that, you know, if the issue with like the publishing industry is that we don't have enough, like, male stories, it's probably because there's just not enough, like, dudes reading all that much, you know? Like, you want to know what's doing great right now? 40K. 40K is pumping out books like mad because they have an audience that will read every 40K book that comes out. I'm one of them. All right, it's tried, it's true, it's proven, and the few publishing agencies that are allowed to publish them are going to keep churning them out. And people like Dan and Simon are going to keep writing them because they're incredible, they're awesome. They found their hyper niche, and I think that the onus is on men to to endeavor to read again. That's not saying that men are doing a bad job. I think that we're doing fine. It's just, I think that specifically with publishing, it still does hold a little bit true that the market does reflect consumer or reader habits. So I said a lot of research. After my hour and a half of research, that's kind of the little monologue that I came up with. I don't have much more to say. Go buy my book. Go buy my book, or just go download it because it's free. It's really good. I'll put the link in the description. Thanks, guys.